It's the Blue Vote Café, a little bit wonkish, a whole lot of fun. Well, although I think this episode's going to be a little bit more serious than a lot of them have been in the past. I'm David Schellenberg along with Rachel Wigster in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. Hello, Rachel.
Hi, David. How are you?
Pretty good. It's a beautiful, sunny August morning in Canada.
Well, yes, it is. But we do have confirmation that a tornado touched down in Ottawa yesterday.
Yes, which is interesting because we've now had several tornadoes over the past couple of weeks. And our part of the world gets tornadoes. This is nothing new, but wow, there seems to be a lot more of them than there used to be.
Oh, there sure are. I mean, I'm not sure I even knew of one in all my years in Ottawa until maybe 4 years ago.
Right. Interesting episode today, but before we get into it, a little bit of a reminder to vote from abroad.
Yes, we can't emphasize that enough. If you are living outside the country and you or a parent were born in the U.S., you should go to votefromabroad.org every year and request your ballot. It doesn't matter if you've registered elsewhere. We strongly urge you to use VFA, instead of registering with your local election officer.
Right.
And if you want a reminder for all the reasons why, go find our episode with Heidi Birch, the coordinator of Vote From Abroad. And the other reason to do it is that we have, if you're listening to this episode not too long after we've recorded it, there are elections coming up very soon in Ohio, Kentucky, Virginia, New Jersey, Mississippi, and Pennsylvania. Yes, it's 2023. It's not a presidential election year. Nevertheless, there are state elections and you should be participating.
And a big part of the realization, I think, that a lot of us have to get into our heads is it is more than just the presidential election. There are so many elections going on, and it is important to be a part of every single one of them because so much happens at the state level. And if you don't participate in the state level elections, then you're really missing out on a lot of big policy changes.
You are doing a little teaser for our next episode.
Oh, who's with us today, Rachel?
Oh, we'll leave that as a mystery. Today, we have asked Amerika Garcia Grewal back to the pod. We talked to her last when she was in Fiji, and she's now somewhere else entirely and has a lot to tell us. Amerika, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah. So tell us where you are and what is going on there.
Well, I'm in my hometown of Eagle Pass, Texas. Went to elementary, middle school, high school, went to junior college here, but we don't have a 4-year institution, so I had to go away to college, and I never came back. I mean, that's an exaggeration.
Happened to a lot of us.
Yes, you're not alone.
But I came back in August, mid-July of 2022. I went to San Antonio. My mom was in the hospital for surgery, and then I followed her back to Eagle Pass during her rehab. And then I've been, here in Canada and Vancouver and Mexico and Ireland and a number of places in the last 12 months. But while my mom's recovering and going into another surgery later this year, I've been using Eagle Pass as a home base. And so I've reconnected with, folks that I went to high school with, the local Democratic Party, and my Rotary Club, the things that you do when you're a place that you're from.
Right.
And one of the things that I noticed was that life on the border is different than when I grew up.
Yeah. So paint us a little bit of a picture. Where is Eagle Pass in Texas?
Okay. Eagle Pass is a border town in Texas. We're located on the Rio Grande River. We're directly across from the much larger city of Piedras Negras, Coahuila. So we are 38,000 people in the last census, and Piedras Negras, I think, is about 300,000 people.
Wow.
So, yeah. For example, we have an H-E-B grocery store. Yay, Texas.
Well, right across the border, they have a Days Inn and a Holiday Inn and a Marriott.
An even larger H-E-B. And there are items. If I want to go for, certain grains and things like that are, exotic grains, I can actually find them easier in Mexico than I can in Eagle Pass because we're such a small town. And it's an economically disadvantaged town as well. So people are just trying to keep their head above water to begin with. There's a lot of brain drain. A lot of our young have left Eagle Pass. They may have stayed in Texas, but they're no longer here. So out of a graduating class of 500, I've only been able to make contact with a handful of people who are still in town.
Right.
So tell us about the differences that you noticed when you returned.
Well, some of them I was aware of already. So, for example, after September 11th, the port of entry just shut down entirely.
Oh.
Nobody could go in or out.
Yeah.
And when things reopened, in order to cross the border, you had to have your passport. And you're probably seeing this in Canada. It's something like, oh, yeah, that happened long ago.
Absolutely. Well, 9/11, yeah. It used to be a driver's license was enough to cross the border.
Yeah, or just a good excuse, I think. Let us.
And they would wave you back and forth. Like if you hadn't crossed, I had a funny experience in Vermont where we had to use the bathroom and they were like, oh, just drive in and use it over there and then come back and we'll check you through.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There was a place in south of Winnipeg that we would cross the border to go for steaks in the United States. And when you would come back, they would say, the Canadians say, well, what were you doing? You say, well, we went to Jack's for steaks. So they go, all right, well, come on home.
Did you have it rare?
Well, then you know what it's like living here. So, I mean, it was a little bit more complicated than going across town, but it was still like going across town.
Yeah.
When I came back, and because I came in from outside of Fiji, from Fiji, I didn't have health insurance. But there's a great big booming town steps away, and there is a medical district that has spread out. Oh goodness, that has grown up just right across from the international bridge, and so I can stop in Eagle Pass in our dying business district, walk across the bridge, which is, the length of a football field. And, I can take my pick of, dentists and chiropractors and physical therapists and orthopedics and pediatricians and pharmacies, so many pharmacies, all right there, right around the bridge. And so I started doing that. And so every time, I needed something or I need to pick up antibiotics or, all these different things, I'm crossing the bridge. And one of the things that I first noticed was the concertina wire on the bridge itself. So
now the story
this,
takes a very dramatic turn. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's this statue, of friendship, symbolizing the friendship between our two countries. And in front of it, it had concrete barriers and then poles in the barriers with concertina wires strung across them. And I'm like, okay, wow. So in my Instagram feed, you've actually got a picture of this eagle with the barbed wire in front of it. The other thing is at the midpoint where the U.S. ends and Mexico begins, there are now gates that can swing shut. It used to be the bridge was absolutely, totally, completely open. Now there are gates. And something I've also learned is apparently there are drills on a semi-regular basis where the United States, it's like, okay, go. And they practice shutting the gate and then putting these concrete barriers in place. So even if someone tried to ram the gate, they wouldn't be able to come onto the United States. And I'm just like, what? What on earth is going on here?
Just for those who do know, because I had to look it up, what concertina wire is... It's that round wire that you see on tops of fences and stuff with a whole bunch of little razor blade things stuck in it. It's nasty.
Yeah. And it's called concertina because it comes into a coil and then it expands out and it expands and contracts relatively easy. So it's popular with, military installments because it can be very quickly installed. It is worse than barbed wire and it has razor blades. I'm jumping ahead of myself in the story here, but at the city council meeting this week, one of the speakers wanted to present a 1-foot-long piece of concertina wire to the mayor. And as she approached the mayor, she had law enforcement from both sides coming like, we'll take that. And they would not let her go past the podium with the concertina wire in hand. Wow. And then afterwards, I was in the lobby and I watched one of the city employees walking through the metal detector trying to figure out how did this get in. And security said that there were so many cameras and so many things coming in that, when it went off, they're like, oh, it's fine. They didn't see any like a weapon or anything on her. Right. And so she was waved through. But so this concertina wire is bad news, not allowed in city buildings. And yet we have 7 miles of it.
Oh, wow.
God.
Wow.
7 miles of it that have been installed on the U.S.-Mexico border. Now, some of it was installed by the federal government on the bridge, but much more of it has been installed. Well, DPS claimed 7 miles of it. So I'm not sure how much the Customs and Border Patrol did on the international bridges, but along the riverbank, DPS says that they put significant power, people hours, and money into installing the 7 miles of concertina wire.
What does DPS stand for?
DPS is Department of Public Safety. It's the Texas. So that actually brings me to the next thing.
Okay.
So we've got the city of Eagle Pass that owns the bridge and charges a toll for you to go across. But you have combined Customs and Border Patrol that manages the entry into the country. And so they have responsibility, jurisdiction over it. In March of 2021, Governor Greg Abbott declared an emergency and launched Operation Lone Star. And he's taken every officer that he has control over and he's sent them to the border. So, for example, when my family came down to stay here at Christmas time, hotel rates in Eagle Pass were as high as $600 for a king-size room per night.
Wow.
And a similar room in Piedras Negras, Mexico was running about $75 US. So, and it's just the pressure of all of these officers being deployed to the border. Your tax dollars at work, except that the officers have these temporary duty assignments that take them away from their family, and they're miserable. And what they're doing is really impacting their mental health. Border Patrol in 2022 had their highest rate of suicides that they'd ever had.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I mean, this is not something that anybody's happy with. And to be honest, I'm not happy with this. You know, I would love not to be telling you about this because it's not here, but the things that I saw and the things that I've learned about, I cannot unsee them and I cannot be quiet.
Right. So back to the story. So yeah, you saw the wire stretched across, and then what did you do?
Yeah, so going across rivers, all the concertina wire, things are different here. You know, life goes on. And we're hearing about last year there were 800 asylum seekers, immigrants. I can't say that every one of them was an asylum seeker, but Customs and Border Patrol reported for the last fiscal year that over 800 people died trying to enter the United States. Right. Not all of them were drownings. Some of them were people who were trapped in tractor trailers that were abandoned. There were car accidents, heavily overloaded vehicles. I think there was a car accident with 8 people that were killed in a single accident that rolled. Wow. So it's not entirely the river, but there were a lot in the river. And we were talking about this last night. My mom goes, what do we do? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not an immigration specialist. I don't have the answer. But I know we don't need this. This is wrong. This is not right. So going back to the river, I was actually in Ireland visiting my sister, and I got a message from one of the Young Democrats, and she says, like, hey, there's going to be a protest at Shelby Park, which is the city park that's right there on the river. Can you come? I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I'm not. I'm not in Eagle Pass. You know, I'm very much not in Eagle Pass. Yeah. And she's like, okay. And, you know, goes on. And I forward the message to a couple of folks, my little collectivism. Yeah, July 7th, I'm driving in town and I'm like, oh, I wonder how their protest went. And I look at her story and I'm like, wait, what? As this group, Eagle Pass Border Coalition, was protesting the announcement of a river buoy wall in the middle of the Rio Grande, the buoys started arriving. We had thought that they would go through, you know, the environmental impact assessments. We had thought that they would, you know, tell us about liability. You know, if they crash into the bridge, this is what's going to happen. You know, this is our flood contingency plan. This is Parks and Wildlife requires a 30-day comment period if anything's going to happen. I think there's 41 different federal regulations that have to be abided by before there's any construction in the bridge. We have, so I'm sorry, I think there's 41 international treaties. I don't remember the number of international regulations, EPA regulations that you have to do there in the river. And so when this was announced in June, it's kind of like, okay, well, he can say he wants to do it, but it'll never happen because there's so much that has to happen, in terms of bureaucracy that, like great pictures, ha ha ha, whatever. And the other thing too is like, it's ridiculous. The river is not that deep in so many places, and you're going to put these, great big plastic balls in the middle of the river, and they're sitting on the riverbed. But again, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Right. I'm driving back into town. I see your Instagram story, and we actually go to a bluff over the river. It's, I don't know, half a mile from where the first international bridge is. And I look down and I realize that they've taken a bulldozer blade and they have just scraped the entire riverbank. Yes. Yeah. And I sent you some of these photos in here. I was just like, how can they do that? Like, you can't do this. Right. Like I know I'm seeing that you did it, but legally you can't do that. You have to have so many permissions and, so many different things. How could they do that? And there's a series of small islands all through the river. And apparently they've gotten the heavy equipment onto those, and they've scraped those as well, saying that people were hiding in them. And so it was necessary.
So the islands are gone.
They're scraped down. They're just barely above the water level now.
Right.
Yeah. So, and any animals that were nesting there, any birds that were landing there, any turtles that had nests there, it's all gone. Yeah. So, we, one of the retired teachers here has a business, Epi's Canoe and Kayak, and, he wanted to spend every day of retirement on the river, and he can't anymore. One of the things they've done is they've installed great big chain link doors, 2.5 meters tall, and then rows of wire above them at the city boat ramp, the only public access boat ramp. And he couldn't go down there. Like they effectively took his business out of business right there. Right. So he filed a lawsuit saying like, hey, you can't do this. I'm a small business owner. Like, someone's got to speak up for this. And oh, by the way, look at what they've done to the islands. Look at what they've done to the riverbank. They're like digging up the riverbed itself. We filed a petition on change.org. We had a call script. Media advisories were being put out by EP Border Coalition, but also by the Laredo No Walls group as well. So they had successfully fought to keep Trump's border wall off their land, saying like, no, you're cutting us off in the land. Like, eminent domain is great, but we live here. Some of the original plans in Laredo had the border wall going through homes. They would separate people from their livestock and their Yeah. So EP Border Coalition got some help from the Laredo No Walls group. And we had a city councilwoman from Laredo, a landowner who'd been affected by the walls, come up and say like, hey, this stuff's not cool. Very much
That's an
not
understatement.
Cool. Yeah. So Jesse Fuentes, Epi's Canoe and Kayak, filed an emergency injunction, but it wasn't heard for a week. And actually, I think it was longer than a week. I feel like it was 2 or even 3 weeks. And the state of Texas began installing the buoys. So these.
So this is early July?
This is, we're getting into the end of July there.
End of July.
So. It is basically a working concept here. It's 1,000 feet of these buoys. They're each about 4 feet in diameter. They're round, and they have a heavy cable that runs through them. And the media illustrations show them continuous, 900 miles of the river. And they also show a net underneath them and show that they're anchored into the riverbed. There were so many people saying, we want to see the buoys, we want to see the buoys. The buoys were installed off of private property, and the Heavenly Farms that was very much unwilling in all of this, and we're told, it's a disaster declaration, we're taking your land. Yeah, so they would allow people onto their land as far as the chain link fence had been installed, but then people could not go any further down to see the actual buoys. So Jesse Fuentes from Epi's Canoe and Kayak organized a river tour for the 1st of August.
Oh.
And and I was supposed to be driving my mom to San Antonio for appointments. And then my dad's like, oh, I'm going to go. So like I immediately turned around like, guys, I'm here. I want to go. Because I wanted to see for myself,
Yeah.
Right.
But also, my dad had a canoe, and I remember like we used to get in a few miles upriver from the first bridge, and we used to just glide down the river, and it was so peaceful and so beautiful. And I took that love with me, to the Appalachian Mountains, and I got to kayak on lakes there. I got to kayak a lot when I was in Fiji. I've done whitewater rafting in North Carolina and Tennessee. Like, I love the water. And so I was like, if there's a space, please let me on it, and I found out about 10 p.m. the night before that I had a space. We just need you to take pictures. I'm like, done. I can do that. So there were 19 kayaks and 2 canoes that entered the water. I think our group was 26 people all told.
Right.
And we show up, and the first thing I realized is like, whoa, this is a war zone. I mean, there were signs that said law enforcement only. And I need to tell you, this is a city park. Okay, this is, downtown Eagle Pass, where it joins with our sister city of Piedras Negras. This is the only public boat ramp that we have in the entire city.
Wow.
And we have a big old sign that says law enforcement only. And then the base of the ramp has 2 great big swinging gates, about 2.5 meters tall, with concertina wire across the top of them. And the sides of the ramp have concertina wire going down. When we took our group photo before we got in the water, you're trying to, range 26 people and everything. And the photographer's like, a little to the right, please. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, watch that
on
wire.
the edge of the
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's something else.
Wow.
So with, lots of approvals and everything, I had to have a letter that I carried just to park there. Actually, that wasn't checked. They told, be sure you have this. You may be asked for it when you get there. I wasn't asked, but I had it just in case. And then, we all, come down. We are issued our kayaks and our life vests. And, I've got my backpack with the water and the energy bar. And I've got my phone in the plastic sleeve. Like, I've got all this gear on me and everything else. And we came down in the water. And
who was
again,
in the group? The group of, was it all Democrats or politicians, or who was in this?
No, it was people who'd expressed an interest in seeing it. And when I got there, I quickly found out that there were just a tiny number from Eagle Pass specifically. Nearly the entire group were reporters. We also had State Representative Vicki Goodwin. I believe her district is in Austin. And we had some staff from the Rio Grande Study Center. We had a lawyer from the ACLU. Goodness, who else did we have? I'd have to look at the entire list to tell you all the folks.
That gives
but we
us
had
a good
international
picture, though.
media.
Yeah.
We had, I believe, both Univision and Telemundo had reporters there on site. So it was very media heavy. There were so many cameras there. So, and I also need to say, like, my husband's in New York. My son's in Canada. My parents were on the road. We have no internet access, no cell phone access between San Antonio and Eagle Pass because it's very desolate. So I'm getting on the river. I've got my passport like tucked in physically on my body.
I was going to ask if you had your passport with you.
Yes, I know. And they told us, like, do not get onto the Mexican side of the river. Do not touch the buoys. Do not engage with anybody that you see. All this kind of stuff. So I'm like, hands and knees inside at all times. Really listening to the rules that they've given us. But some of the folks, and of course, I mean, they're media, they're flashing press badges, and they're there on fact-finding missions for their offices and stuff like that. They like fully engaged in the experience. And so I watched and I listened to what they did. But I was not as bold as some of the folks that were there. So we got onto the water. I'm in the water. I look back and I'm just like, this is... I don't even know how to explain it. I mean, it was there were so many rolls of wire. Each of those rolls of wire is like $250. And I'm like, we don't have high-speed internet, throughout all of Maverick County. We have rural roads that need to be repaved. We have, healthcare. I talked to a nurse and she said Eagle Pass is one of the sickest places in Texas. People don't go in for routine healthcare. And so when you have problems, they're really bad.
Right.
And you don't have the specialists here, And so I'm looking at all this stuff. And this is just the bulldozing, the fence, the concertina wire. This is not even the buoy wall. And I'm just like, what a waste.
Or the people, the guards and the...
Yeah. So, and then there's this whiplash because you're looking from the water at Shelby Park and this, huge buildup of all these government vehicles, these high-powered boats and, everything else. We have containers, shipping containers lining the riverbanks with concertina wire above them and at their base. And you turn around and Piedras Negras has taken that same area and they have a park, El Paseo del Rio. Oh. And they have beautiful murals. And they have the biggest flag in North America flying over it. And they have selfie spots. And there's trees overlooking the water with fishermen there just lazily casting out into the water. And it was just...
The contrast.
Was the absolute contrast. And I'm like, how can this be happening at the same time? How is this a quote unquote problem for us and not for them?
Right.
And, it feels like this autoimmune disease. One person gets a whiff of pollen and, they just immediately convulse and they can't function at all. And the other one's like, oh, we've got some pollen today. It's like just the contrast in the way the two countries have responded is absolutely incredible. And to our detriment, we have lost access to our park and to this riverbed and to this experience, this beautiful quality of life.
But it's all built on a foundation of what I'm looking for the right word, but it's all in defiance of all the regulations you mentioned and the fact that patrolling the border is not a state responsibility, but a federal responsibility.
Yes. It's not a city responsibility. It's not a state responsibility. It is a federal responsibility.
So what are the implications there? I mean,
well, that's the thing is that our governor is saying like, oh, I just want to enforce the laws that are on the book. And I'm like, no, you don't, because you ignored all of these, every one of them. And we're talking about right to life. I saw mothers carrying children, here. And I'm like, I wrapped my own kid in bubble wrap when he was this age. How horrific must be what they're fleeing that they would be willing to risk this wall of razor wire and, all of these men, carrying weapons, I might add, but like what's behind them that they're willing to go forward with their babe in arms,
right? So as you were floating down the river, you saw people trying to come into the United States.
We did. So Eagle Pass has two international bridges, and in between them runs a railroad bridge. We got past the first one, and there's a park that runs on the Mexican side from before the first bridge to after the third bridge. The two international pedestrian and vehicle traffic for two, and one is the railroad. So they have the park on one side, and then on the U.S. side, we have our city park, we have our golf course, and then we have the land that's under the bridges, which is not open to the public.
Right. Which is now barbed wire and big shipping containers. The shipping containers have been fronted up to the river. And one of the concerns that's been raised and has not been answered is, if the shipping containers were to float off during one of the floods and damage the bridge, who is responsible? Who's going to bear the costs of this? Right. And of course, it's all complicated by this concertina wire. Nobody wants to go near these things because it's dangerous. It will cut you up and it's nasty. Yeah. So we get past the first bridge, we get past the railroad bridge. As we come up under the third bridge, we saw a woman with the forearm crutches, not the ones that go under your arms, but the ones that clasp around your forearm and stuff. And she was trying to get through. She had gotten through two rolls of concertina wire. She'd gotten up the steep bank,
and she was trying to get past the last 2 rolls to make it like to the dry land. And there was this group of men just watching her approach. They were standing on top of the shipping containers and everything. And of course, everyone stops to watch and see what's going on. And the reporters go up. They're like, "Where did you come from? How long have you been traveling?" Things like that. And she answered that she's Venezuelan and she's seeking asylum. And I think because we were there, the officers actually entered through the first row of wires and approached her. And there's a river current, so you have to like actively paddle to stay in one spot. And as I saw them like picking her up, I'm like, okay, like this is done. There's reporters, they'll finish telling her story. I continued on down the river. One of the things that I noticed, and this is another interesting moment. So there are rows of wires going across the riverbank, horizontally. But then every, kind of in irregular portions, there's kind of like a spool of this wire, like a stretched out slinky going from the top of the riverbank into the water. And one of the reporters, I asked about, he's taking pictures, and he's like, I specifically asked DPS, was there razor wire in the water? And they told me no. And he's snapping away. Yeah. Wow. So what we saw as we're going down the river was that people had crossed and they're walking as high up the river bluff as they can. And then when they couldn't find a place to go through, they would actually slip down the riverbank back into the water and sometimes pass the wire and then go around.
Oh my God.
And in one case, so we would see like strips of cloth on the concertina wire with like, what looked like bloodstains on them and stuff. And at one point, I watched this one woman hold on to the wire with the cloth covered wire and use that to ease her way down. And I'm just like, man, how slippery is that bank that you're willing to grasp the razor wire with your bare hand? Like how uncertain is your footing? And it was the guilt here. We're sitting in these kayaks. We've got a beautiful day, lovely breeze coming off, sun blocked up, drifting down the river. Passport, taped to my body. And they are visibly struggling to climb up this bank, and then like just the feet on their face, like, okay, we'll try again. Right.
So how many, can you give us a rough guess at how many people you saw during your time on the river that day?
I would say maybe 20 people or so. I did not see more than 30 people that day. And I probably saw more women and children than I saw men.
Wow.
And, you hear about like, they're led by coyotes and they're carrying backpacks filled with drugs and like that's the fear mongering there. I saw one man with a child on his back, and he had toothbrushes and toothpaste in, one mesh pocket, and, come up behind another man, and he had a baby bottle with milk in it stuffed in the side pocket of his backpack. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, like, you saw like little kids' bags with the happy comic prints, and I'm like, there's no way a drug dealer is using that bag. I mean, that's got all that they have left in this world. That was something else that was really surprising. It is like how little they had. I don't know about you, but whenever we fly, we max out our international allowance, and that's just for 2 weeks.
And you're not even at the Buoys yet.
Yeah, we're not even at the Buoys. Yeah, we've just gotten past like the third bridge. It's about a mile down. So this is like the mile stretch between where the bridges end and where the Buoys get to. So again, listening to the reporters, hearing them talk and stuff, the people that we had seen, they had crossed at dawn or soon after, and they were making their way down the river, trying. So I think we got to the Buoys about 10-ish in the morning, maybe 10:30 in the morning. And there was an island, again, bulldozed flat, that our group of 19 kayakers and 2 canoes, we pulled our boats up onto the island, and then everybody went to the buoys, and they're like, stay 6 feet away. There's legislation, lawsuits pending. Don't touch them.
Right.
Yeah, and one of the folks that was there is like, man, I forgot my spray paint.
I've got to tag it.
So, yeah, I mean, it was interesting, and so our river guide, he set up upriver from it and just kind of kept an eye on that, wanted to make sure that nobody slipped in or fell or anything like that. And I was surprised at how small they were, because when you're in the water, 4 feet is a lot. Like, it's virtually, you cannot boost your body up that many feet.
Mm.
But when these things are sitting on the riverbed, 4 feet is nothing. And they were just flat on the riverbed. They had concrete blocks alternating on either side that they're supposed to be anchored to. And the artist rendering showed that there's a mesh fence that's supposed to be underneath it, so you can't swim under or go over. Wow. But it's sitting like flat, sitting on the riverbed. And that wouldn't be any trouble to get over at all. But it's only 1,000 feet long. You don't have to get over it.
You can go around.
You just go around it. Yeah. It's like the most expensive necklace ever bought.
Oh my God.
It's 1,000 feet long,
It's border security theater, and yet it's hurting.
It is theater.
People.
And it is hurting real people. Yes, right. Absolutely. So not just that, it's hurting the river. So there's concrete blocks that's supposed to be anchored to, and they're staggered on either side of it. And I'm wearing chacos, and the sandals come, the strap's a bit loose. So, I go and put my foot up on the concrete block. I'm not touching the buoys, as I was told. I put my foot up on one of the blocks to tighten the strap, and the block just tips over. And I'm like, whoa. Yeah. And I'm like, I didn't do it. So I did do it. But,
not on purpose.
It was not on purpose. Totally not on purpose. Yeah. But I like stagger back, out of surprise, and also get my balance and everything. And that entire ground, it's all mushy. It's so where I had been on solid ground and then kind of moved to the side, it just got really mushy. And what's going on is these things are sitting on the riverbed itself, and the currents are digging out underneath the buoys.
Of course, right.
And they're creating a faster, kind of like an airplane, how it lifts because it goes faster one area and slower another area.
Right.
Yeah.
Bernoulli effect.
Very good. Look at that science. Whoa. I think expats, we've flown a lot, right? So what's happening is the terrain, the riverbed around the buoys is very mushy and very unstable. And you're going to go down. Not a question of like when, you're going to go down. Wow. And it was kind of funny to see afterwards a picture how many people were wet from head to toe and how many people were only partially wet. One of the reporters lost his phone, or the phone was damaged because he went over. So I did not. I lost my footing, but I did not go over.
Well done.
So but they're big, they're round. They have what looks like a table saw blade in between all of them.
Ew.
And so like the spot that you would think like, oh, let's cross over here, that would just slice you up right down the middle. And the concrete blocks were unstable after just 10 days in the water. So I shudder to think of what kind of damage they will do to the riverbed if they're there for any length of time.
Mm-hmm. And you were saying this area floods. So, a flood will take that, will wreck that instantly.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, wow. Absolutely. So, and one of the reporters, we get to the thing and he's like, oh, so where's the rest of them? When are they going to finish? We're like, no, this is all of them. Like, this is your Texas tax dollars. And the guy just like lay back on the island and he's like, oh my God, what a failure, because as a political stunt goes, it's stupid. Right. It is ridiculous. But that razor wire, that's just no joke. That's just nasty.
Right.
Yeah. So,
wow. So then what? I mean, you had this. I mean, we know it got to the city council. So
Yeah. Well, we laughed at the Buoys, and we had another half mile. We got back in, and by this time, some folks were like really not having fun. They got ahead of us, and then there were other folks that were still taking pictures and stuff. So our group kind of came out in dribbles. We all went in together, but coming out, there was a bit of stream. And we got to the put out point. Some people had vehicles down there, so they got there early. They got in their cars and they took off. And then the rest of us, we got there. They had arranged with the owners of Heavenly Farms for us to take out, and there were Texas Guardsmen there on the site. They had opened a spot in the concertina wire about 20 feet, and so we came up this muddy bank, and we had 19 kayaks and two canoes. And we're waiting for the outfitter to show up with the truck to start loading everything. And I'm like, I need a ride home, guys. Help. And I got a ride. That wasn't the problem. Well, one of the groups that we had passed earlier on the river, and they've been like walking since dawn, starting 3 miles up river, they come to this break in the wire.
Oh, one of the migrant
and
groups.
They ask us, one of the migrant groups. Yeah. And they ask us, they say, can we come up? And, those of us that were on the boat were like, we can't tell you anything, like yes or no. We can't tell you anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And the Texas Guardsmen, they're like, are the people still on the river? And one of the fellows with the outfitters is like, yeah, we still have one boat that's on the river. So the Guardsmen leave the wire open.
Wow.
And and so this first group, I want to say about 8 people, simply walked ashore. And they're like, hi, we're here. Like,
wow.
Take us in. And the guardsmen are like, we don't do that. We're not Border Patrol, So they're just standing there kind of like, what do we do? And we're kind of looking at them like, what do we do?
Yeah.
And so one of the reporters, ran over to them, and they were asking all kinds of questions. When did you start? Where did you go? Where are you from? They were from Honduras, everything else. And I stopped filming. I'm like, I think this is the end of it. The outfitter rolls up, and they start loading the truck, and they close the concertina wire. Like all the boats are accounted for, everything else. And so one of the guardsmen goes and he pulls it across. It opens and closes, at concertina. And a second group of people show up, and they're looking at the people that they've been traveling with, standing on land, like, hey, let us in.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the guardsmen go and they start pounding a post into place.
Mm-hmm.
And a third group of people show up. And this one is almost entirely women and children. There was a man there who was on 2 crutches, and he had scarring on his face. The man that had the child strapped to his body, he's got another child by the hand, and he goes, "That's my son." And like we all look like a tennis match, at the group on land, and there's a little boy in a blue shirt riding on the shoulders of this younger man, very fit. Yeah. So this father who's physically carrying, one child and holding the other with his wife trailing behind, the oldest child was on the shoulders of a man who's ahead of him. And now they are separated by this concertina wire that we saw the Texas Guardsmen pull across. And we're just there looking, and the kid's like, Daddy, the dad's like, that's my son. And these guys, they're tired. Like, you can see they're tired. You can see where they are bleeding from when that stuff caught them. And I know the stats. 800 people died trying to cross the border last year, and I'm just looking at how tired they are, and they're sunburned. The kids are splashing water on themselves because it's so hot. Our temperature has been in the 40s forever. And I'm like, if this kid goes back to his father, like, their chances of survival have just dropped.
Wow.
It is the trolley problem. What do you do? There is this wire that we just saw get stretched right in front of us, and we are here. What do we do?
Wow.
And you talk about these things in class, and ethical dilemmas and everything else. What are your values? What's important to you? And I'm just sitting there like, my God, he's going to die. Like, if he goes back over the water, like, somebody's going to die. And the young man who's got the boy on his shoulders, he comes down to the riverbank and he passes this boy to his father. And the woman from the Rio Grande study group, as this is going on, she's like, "Oh man, if the ACLU lawyer was here, he would know what to do." And I'm like, call him.
Right,
so she stops filming. Yes. And so she calls him, drops a GPS location pin as to where we were on the location thing. And then another man runs up to the guards and is like, "The ACLU lawyer is on their way." I'm filming this entire time. And oh my goodness. It was just super tense. And it's like, if I were to do something, what do I do? How do I use this decision point here, to help the most people, but also to help this person right here in front of me. Like if there was a child in front of a speeding vehicle, you'd pull that child to safety. Well, there's this child going back into the river. How do we pull this kid to safety? And it was horrific.
With his family.
He's with his family. Yes.
But I mean, you want to pull not just the child, you want to pull the whole family to safety.
Yeah. So we're all trying to figure out who to call, what to do, how to get some help to them. Do we, all of us approach the wire and pull it back? What do we do? And one of the guardsmen comes up with his, orange clippers, and he clips the wire, the clamp holding it together, and he pulls it back. And this cheer just goes up from the people who are already on land. And I just start sobbing. I'm like, okay, I didn't have to do it today. I didn't have to throw myself in harm's way to save somebody else. But this happens every single day. Yeah. And that was Tuesday. Wednesday, they found the body of a child in the river. The first body was found in the Buoys. And I believe the total number of dead found in the river was 4, including a child from Honduras, just like the child that we saw pass back to his father on Tuesday.
Wow.
Yeah. So all this happened before noon.
Wow.
Oh my God, what a day.
What a story.
Hey, what a day. Yeah. So we regrouped. I had a group come back to my house, and, I had them with showers and, running towels up and down the stairs to get everyone showered up, because there was a press conference on the steps of the city hall at 4:30 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. There was a meeting with city council. The mayor of the city council had signed an affidavit for DPS saying that he was the owner of the private property known as Shelby Park, and the address was given. And he was authorizing the state of Texas to file criminal trespassing charges against anybody who was caught at Shelby Park.
A city park.
Yeah, a city park. Yeah, it's not private property.
No, he doesn't know.
The mayor can't do that. And if he does do that with the approval of the city council, we've got to meet the Open Meetings Act here in Texas. We've got sunshine laws for a reason. So the issue was put onto the agenda for Tuesday evening. We had over an hour of commentary, mostly from people like me, but we had 3 people, I think DPS and an attorney for the state of Texas, and the county attorney, who spoke and said, we need to have this. And all of the rest of the testimony was like, here are all the reasons why it's bad. For example, Operation Lone Star means that we have a lot more DPS in town. Do you know that if you live in a Texas border town, you are, and I don't remember the number, but multitude of times more likely to be cited for driving violations and, all these other different kinds of violations. And did you know, and they start giving all these different statistics and everything else. And, I got up and I'm like, guys, I'm ashamed. This is not the way we treat asylum seekers. And, it was very heartfelt. But there were also a lot of facts and figures that were brought up. And the city council went into executive session. Well, the city council first had their entire meeting. So from 5:30 to 8:30, they had their regular meeting, the library report, business as usual. Yeah. And most of the people who had been in this meeting, we went out to the lobby and we networked. We walked around like, oh, wow, I was so impressed by what you said. Let's talk. And I came home with a stack full of business cards from the Texas Civil Rights Project and the ACLU and, city councilmen in Laredo and newspaper reporters and, all these different people. And they're like, we want to talk to you. And did you know? And in Laredo, this is what we did when Trump tried to bring his wall in and, everything else. So we got 3 hours of networking. And then they broke for executive session. They were in executive session for 1 hour. And when they came out, the mayor said, things have changed. This is not what I signed up for. We are going to rescind the trespassing affidavit and renegotiate.
Good.
We're going to confer with our council, the City of Eagle Pass Council, and notify DPS. So incremental win. We got our park back.
Right.
But Wednesday morning, went to the park, and DPS is like, what are you talking about? We don't know anything. Nobody told us. And he went inside, called command and control, and they are like, yeah, the city did it. So he came out, he's like, do whatever you want, So the park is accessible to the town again. The boat ramp is not. And then also on Wednesday, we learned that there had been 4 deaths on the river. And the other thing is, today is Friday. To date, DPS has not yet had formal notification of, the rescinding of the memo. So everybody knows it's international news, but it's not been written out. So, yeah.
Yeah, today is August 4th. So as of today, the buoys are still in the water, and
yes,
and the wire is all still there, and we wait and see what happens.
Well, yes, we do. Monday night, there is a memorial service planned for not just the one asylum seeker who was caught in the buoy wall, but also for, the quite literally thousands of people who've perished trying to enter the United States. Jesse is leading another kayak tour on Monday morning. And so Monday we have the kayak tour, we have the memorial service in the evening, and on Tuesday, Congressman Joaquin Castro is bringing a congressional delegation to Eagle Pass to see for themselves what's going on. And I've been asked to be part of that when they meet with the local population. I've been part of that group and share what I saw and what my thoughts are.
It's interesting when you talk about how much global travel you do, and as Democrats abroad, we live all around the world by choice. We say that's a lovely country, and I would like to go there, and I would like to be a part of that community. I'd like to learn things when I go to this country. I'd like to explore new things, and then yet our country, the United States, just makes it so complicated sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
the other thing is, I've been all over the United States in the last 12 months, and everywhere you go, there's help wanted signs,
Yeah,
people want someone to work. And we've got people who are quite literally dying for the chance to work. If you've been in, Asia, if you've been even in Europe, the population density is so different from what it is in the United States, We have the space, we have the resources, we have an aging population. Let's welcome these folks with open arms, because again, they're asylum seekers. The folks that we passed for Venezuelan and Honduran, we have said we are taking asylum seekers from these countries, and yet we're greeting asylum seekers with concertina wire and armed men. Not just armed men. If you look at my photos, you'll see that the guardsmen are there, and they have hats pulled down over their eyes. They've got gaiters pulled up to their noses, and they do not have name tags on there.
Wow.
Yeah. So
well, I think we're going to try to we'll figure out a way to make some of your photos accessible to people. We'll put a link in the description of the episode once we figure out how to do that. But is there something concrete we can ask people to do?
Yes. call your congressman, call your governor, call every single person that you have and say, we've got to have border security without cruelty. So, and I don't care whose fault it is. Like, I don't care if it's Texas. I don't care if it's aliens from outer space. I don't care if it's the federal government. Like, I don't care. Like really, you guys figure that out, and you can figure that out 10 years from now. Okay, fix this now. Get this wire off of our river, because this is not the way we treat people. And we talked about climate change at the very beginning and how hot it is and everything else.